Episode 6 of Winning Time, Memento Mori, is over, and we're here to talk about it. I'm Jose Salviati, editor at thepeachbasket.net, and I lived through the Lakers 80 Showtime era.
And I'm Evan. I also lived through the Lakers Showtime era, and I'm a contributor for the Peach Basket. And you can follow me on Twitter at morehoops727.
I'm Akeem. I'm also a writer at the Peach Basket, and I'm obviously not old enough to have lived through the 80s, but I am enjoying this revisit of the history of the Lakers team. And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Akeem802.
All right, I got to take offense, Akeem. Neither Evan nor I look old enough. That's why we have to say it. Because people would be like, wait, you guys live? There's no way. That's why we say it, just to be clear. Yeah, Akeem's like, right. All right. Listen, I've had such a blast doing this. The show has been great, and talking to you guys has been fun. I'm excited to see that, people are reading or watching the recaps that we do, leaving comments. Thank you so much. We do this, because it's fun. We would do it regardless, I think, because this is what we do, is we talk basketball. But being able to, share this and get your thoughts as you watch this just really means a lot to us. So we're grateful for every comment, grateful for every view. Sincerely, thank you. If you happen to be watching us live, we want this to be as interactive as possible. We want to hear from you. So if you're joining us on Twitter, if you could, head over to Facebook, search for Peach Basket 2021, or you can go to YouTube, search for the Peach Basket. You'll find us there. We can leave or we can take your comments there. Unfortunately, we can't on Twitter. You're welcome to watch us on Twitter, but we can't interact with you. And we want to. We want to hear your comments, your questions. Tell us we're wrong. Tell us we're right. We want to hear what you thought about the episode as we tell you what we thought. We really, really absolutely want to hear from you. And thank you for watching and participating with us. In episode 6, the team and Coach Westhead deal with the repercussions of McKinney's accident. Dr. Butts continues to dance and work with smoke and mirrors to keep his predators at bay, while Magic struggles to come to grips with being Magic. And he makes a key decision about footwear. Coach Westhead reluctantly prepares for a game as McKinney begins his recovery. That's the basic overview of what was a powerful episode, no doubt. Evan, we'll start with you. What were your thoughts on episode 6, Memento Mori?
Oh, I really enjoyed this episode. This was kind of a little bit more of a thinker kind of episode, and it was really about Paul and him having to take over from Jack, and and just kind of not quite being ready for it, and not really being a little unsure about it, and and the title is interesting. Memento Mori is a Latin phrase for remember that you have to die. And if you think about it, kind of both Jack and Paul kind of they both had to kind of grapple with that a little bit, like Jack in reality almost dying, and Paul kind of like dying inside of having to try and take this over.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting. And then one of the things that I really also liked was the whole shoe thing and the Converse thing. I used to own a pair of those Magics back then, without the name on it back then. I remember that, the ad with him and Larry Bird both having the shoe, and it was this choose your weapon thing and everything like that. So yeah, I thought that was really cool. And then it was cool getting to see Phil Knight for the first time, because like at that point, like he was still just trying to figure it out, so that was kind of cool. And then Mike Epps as Richard Pryor was so good. So good. And then I thought it was really hilarious that they even put the little caption under him of, Richard Pryor, positive influence.
Right.
that killed me because he was not.
They laid the groundwork there for, the those of us who know Spencer Haywood know what's coming.
Mhm.
So they definitely, laid the groundwork pretty well.
Yeah, and then and that was also interesting. You started to see Magic. He's starting to really rub his teammates the wrong way. They don't like that he's hanging out with Jerry Buss, and
Yeah.
they don't. So he's still got a little friction there, and that was really interesting to see how that's still developing, and you know, and then that, like I said, I just really kind of enjoyed how this was so much about Paul, because he's such a deep thinker and intellectual guy. He was very reserved and unsure, but a lot of that is that he's an introvert. He's
Yeah.
always thinking, so he's not good at being out there all the time. And that's something I can kind of relate to. Like, I'm a bit of an introvert myself, so yeah, I really enjoyed this episode a lot.
Nice. All right, Keem, what's your take?
Well, I thought there were kind of three major points in this episode. One was kind of getting more into Paul Westhead's mind, and I thought a major theme for him was imposter syndrome. Like, he doesn't feel like he should be there. He doesn't feel like he deserves to be a coach because he doesn't have the previous NBA coaching experience or NBA playing experience. And, like they mentioned multiple times, he was a teacher the year before at LaSalle University. So him kind of grappling with that in his head throughout the episode was a major point. I thought it was a good way to get to know his character more. And then the second part, Magic, you're getting more into his business dealings, and he's really just at the point where he's trying to figure out who can he trust as he's stepping into this, into more fame and more opportunities. And he's just not quite sure where to go. And then the third thing.
So key. Sorry, Keem. No, I'm glad you touched on that. I'm just saying that's such a good point, because so many players of his era didn't make the right decision and literally lost millions because of it.
Yeah.
So I thought it was really, and I didn't, I took some notes about, what kind of drew me in. I didn't think about that, but that was really telling to see Magic, try to make the right decisions. Didn't always do it, but he wanted somebody there kind of guiding him, which, kind of was ahead of the game for somebody that young. And like I said, a lot of other people did not make those, make that decision, and it cost them. So anyway, sorry. Yeah, I thought that was a great point.
Yeah. And then the third thing, just having Phil Knight in the episode, even though it's kind of a small part, you kind of see like the framework for Nike growing. Like in this year, they're probably like the fifth, maybe seventh biggest sneaker company, or even smaller than that. But you see the framework of him trying to find a superstar, put their name on a sneaker, and promote that to become a big company. And unfortunately for Magic, he turns that down. But Nike becoming, like, signing Jordan and creating the Jordans is a major part of NBA history, and really allowed the NBA to cross over more into pop culture, because those sneakers become fashion, and you kind of see like basketball culture in general kind of elevates in the 90s. You get all these basketball movies and basketball based streetwear and all this kind of stuff. Like, that all started with Phil Knight and Nike.
Yep.
Yeah. It kind of comes back to a theme, that I touched on, or tried to write last week, how everything worked perfectly, right? It was like the convergence, a perfect storm happened for this team to be great. And now we're seeing, Phil Knight come along at the right time, right as, Magic and Bird and the league was starting to bubble. Phil Knight was doing the same thing and kind of created a whole new, I don't want to call it an industry, because the industry existed, but a whole new genre within that industry, which is amazing. It just, seeing Phil Knight in that was pretty interesting. I had said to Evan before that this one felt a little like a filler to me, and you guys both corrected me, which I appreciate. For me, I think what was hard here is, whereas last week we followed the team over, the start of the season. We know that they were on a 13-game winning streak or something. So we followed them over a couple of weeks, and, a lot, it seemed like there was a lot of meat there, even though the focus was on Kareem. This week it felt like it dragged a little bit, and that's because maybe the whole being in a hospital scene kind of freaks me out. Maybe it's a personal thing. I just felt so bad for McKinney, and maybe that's why, at the heart of why it felt like that for me. It was no doubt a deep episode, and I came to the realization, right? Again, a bit of a recurring theme, that I've shared when talking to you guys about this. That I've learned things I didn't necessarily want to know about Spencer Haywood, Jerry West, Chick Hearn, right? Today, watching this, it was a bit of a realization that I think the Lakers really did McKinney wrong. I've said before, I kind of started to grow up and be a self-aware human, right? When this started happening, I remember that San Diego game, watching it like it was yesterday. So I was aware of Jack McKinney. He was the coach then. I have literally no recollection of the Lakers making an announcement. Imagine, right, today, if any head coach in the NBA, that would happen to them. That would be front page. Then it's in part because of ESPN, and there's so much more media out there today, and there wasn't then. But it would have been in the LA Times. It would have been out there. We would have heard about it. As a fan, I heard nothing. And it really does seem, and again, I don't know what's fact and what's fiction yet, because I haven't, dived deep into it, but it really feels like, the Lakers kind of did him dirty a little bit, and kind of didn't want to tell anybody. And you get why when you see this, but again, I don't know what's fact and what's fiction, but it was like, man, when I think of what would happen today if Quinn Snyder, if this happened to him, I don't want, Quinn Snyder's not obscure, but Utah, it's not necessarily NBA, franchise, an elite franchise necessarily. But even if, somebody like Quinn Snyder, I think everybody would know about it, not just Utah fans. And I can say, as a Laker fan at that time, I knew nothing. I didn't know anything. All I knew is, Paul Westhead's the coach now. Okay. And looking back on that, that's kind of a bummer. It's
yeah. Well, I think that really speaks to, the eras being so different, because back then you could kind of get away with not telling the press the whole truth. Like even injury reports back then were a little shady, and they really didn't kind of, because there weren't any regulations to keep things in control. And nowadays we have the regulations about injury reports, as well as, it's impossible because, like you said, there's media everywhere. There's even people like us that are everywhere,
we're
so it's
part of the problem.
You can't hide this stuff from any of us. The tiniest little rumor that happens, that's what's so different between what goes on now and what went on back then. The tiniest little rumor gets run with, and it's all over the internet everywhere. And back then, you might hear a rumor years later, it wasn't traveling as fast,
Right.
Yeah, I think,
no, it's true. And I do have, go ahead, Akeem.
I was just going to say, I think also, just from the first 6 episodes here, Dr. Buss is constantly trying to spin everything and make the Lakers look more glorified than they actually are. So maybe he felt like at the time that the Lakers couldn't handle that bad press. So he just wanted to move on as quick as possible.
Yeah. Excellent point. Yeah. I think the timing of it does have a lot to do with it, because I think if Jerry Buss wasn't dealing with all that other stuff, that he might have been a little more inclined to tell the truth, but the era, you never know,
Yeah, no, Evan, you bring up a great point. Now we have TMZ Sports, right, who's following everybody around with cameras, and there's just no way you can't hide anything. Back then, you could hide everything.
Yeah.
I have one memory. I've told you guys before. I would go to games then, or I think I've mentioned it. And there was a guy who was kind of the Mike Trudell of the time. I cannot remember his name for the life of me. I'll find it and leave it in the notes if I can think of it later. But this is a guy we all knew, we all watched on TV. And I was down, near the Laker locker room as my friend who would go into the Lakers. If I haven't told the story, I'll tell it another time. But I saw this guy, this Mike Trudell of the time, and he had an alcoholic beverage on one hand, he had a big old cigar on the other. He's coming out of the Forum Club, and it just, to me as a young man at the time, this guy was squeaky clean on TV. You know what I mean? And so you knew right away, there's something going on here. These guys aren't who they, who they show us on TV. But the difference was all you had was TV, right? Back then. So yeah, this was, and I guess that's why the episode, I'm not gonna say it rubbed me the wrong way, because it didn't. But it just felt longer for me, because I think maybe it was just hard for me to watch a lot of that. The last thing I'll say, and then we'll get on to the next topic, is I'm officially upset that HBO didn't call this Showtime. Now I get why they didn't. I totally get it. But come on, man, this was not winning time. Nobody called it winning time. I do seem to recall that. Magic once said, it's winning time when playoff time was winning time, I think. I don't even know if I made that up. But this was Showtime. That was the name of the book. This should have been called Showtime. It would have been awesome for HBO to call it Showtime on HBO. That'd be awesome. That'd be the coolest thing ever. I wish they would have done that. But anyway, I finally came to that point after watching this episode for some reason. So anyway,
I agree with you.
Right? It should be called Showtime. All right, episode 7. All we know right now is that it's called Invisible Man. What do you see coming in episode 7, Evan?
Oh, this one, that's interesting. I'm not sure what's going to come in this one.
Yeah,
I think I got so kind of wrapped up in this one that I mean, because at this point, it's I think the next main storyline that I see is we're going to start to see Spencer Haywood's downfall.
Oh yeah.
And I think for people that don't quite know about that, Spencer has a drug problem, and it's about to get exacerbated by Richard Pryor in a very big way.
Yeah.
So I think that's probably what is in the next episode. If not, it will be within the next 2.
Yeah. Yep. Makes sense. Akeem, what do you see coming?
Well, I mean, I don't really know the history of Lakers, but do they introduce Pat Riley becomes the assistant this year, or does that not happen until the next season?
That should happen at some point, I believe.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should happen fairly soon. Like within a few months, I believe it happens. So maybe even a few weeks. So
maybe that is the Invisible Man reference, because there was kind of a brief moment in this episode where Pat Riley he just helps calm Paul Westhead down and kind of figure out a direction for him to go in. And so maybe that's kind of the reference there. Like, Pat Riley's working in the background, making things happen, but he's not quite the head coach yet,
Yeah, I like your thinking on that one.
Yeah, that's awesome. There was that great scene where at the start where he goes back thinking that McKinney's at the office, and there's Pat with his sneakers up on the desk, making himself comfortable. I thought that was a good foreteller of what's coming.
Was a great scene.
That's a great call. I think you guys are both right. Yeah, right. And again, knowing Pat Riley, it fits.
Yep.
I think you guys are right. I think it'll probably be something along those lines. We'll continue to certainly see the team's success. I think we'll see the beginning of Spencer spiraling, unfortunately, and how that ends. The emergence of Pat Riley. I that seems like the next logical step. Be interesting to see why they call it Invisible Man. All right, we do this every week. It's fun. I enjoy it. We are sports fans, so we got to pick a winner. So episode 6, do you have a winner, and do you have a favorite scene? Again, doesn't need to include your winner, but who is your winner of this episode, and what's your favorite scene?
Yeah, my winner was Mike Epps as Richard Pryor. I mean, that that was such a like spot on impersonation, and like yeah, I really felt like I was watching Richard there. I mean that I really liked that a lot. And then for me, my favorite scene was the one that you just mentioned with Pat Riley and Paul Westhead, in the office there, and especially where you know Paul opens up the binder, Jack's binder, and he's looking at it, trying to figure out what to do in the next game, and like Pat just kind of asks him, well, what would you do? And then like
Right.
slams it shut, like that's his stuff. What would you do? And like
Right.
I really like that because that's so like yeah, Adrian Brody is doing such a good job of personifying Pat, and that's so Pat of kind of like he'll just put you on the spot and like make you kind of think about it and do it yourself as opposed to tell you. And I really liked that. That was a great scene.
Nice. Yeah, good call. Good call. I enjoyed that scene as well. Hakeem, what do you got? Who's your winner? What's your scene?
It's a tough episode to pick a winner for because it was like one of the more negative episodes. So there's a lot of losing going on. But I would go with Jerry Buss because his goal for the episode was to kind of BS his way through that meeting with the bankers and get that extension. And he eventually makes that come true. And my favorite scene was when they're in the Forum Club there, and he tells them that he will take the 30% interest loan and the 6-month extension as long as it goes till June, because in June you'll be begging me to keep this business. So he's just kind of putting on his poker face again there, and I just like that. It was very ballsy scene.
Yeah.
100%, man. And that's the biggest. There's so many takeaways, but that to me just resonates, right? And I want to know how close was this to reality? I mean, was he literally that close to bankruptcy? I mean, it just blows my mind to think that, he was, I used the term smoke and mirrors in my earlier recap. I mean, that's what Jerry West is, at least, depicted in this episode and depicted in this series. He was all about, the first season, smoke and mirrors, man. Yeah, there's an old adage about fake it till you make it, right? And that's kind of what he was doing. And that's crazy. I think fake it till you make it. I think, I'm going to pretend to know a particular subject in school until I figure it out or something. He was faking it till he made it with a multi-million-dollar franchise.
Yeah.
That blows my mind, and you said ballsy. I mean, that's just the epitome of it. It's just so wild. I got to go with Jason Segel as or Siegel. I don't know how to pronounce
Siegel.
it.
I think it's
Siegel. Sorry. As my winner, I just thought, Paul Westhead, the way he's depicted, and this is always the way I remember him. Just real quiet, very methodical, very cerebral, but a coach. I mean, he demanded authority. He commanded respect, really. And that's kind of hard, I think, as an actor to convey that. And I thought he did a pretty good job. Evan, you and I talked about that scene when, he's fighting it, then kind of comes to grip. I got to coach this. And he wants Coop in the starting lineup, and he benches Haywood, the veteran, and Haywood calls him out, and he goes, "Is there a problem?" Right? And he showed that authority, and you bought into it, right?
Yeah.
At least I did. So I thought that was pretty neat. I think as an actor that might be hard to do, but I think that's who Paul Westhead was. Whoops, dropped my pen. Sorry. He was both kind of a nerdy guy, which is depicted clearly, but he was also coach, right? And he commanded that respect. And we started to see a little bit of that. I thought that was pretty cool. So he's my winner, and that was my scene. I thought that was a pretty powerful scene that really kind of peeled back the onion a little bit on who Westhead was, because we know he had some great success moving forward, and that's why. All right, man, that's it. Always fun, like I say. Great time watching, great time talking. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you, as always, for watching. Thank you for listening. We'll be back next week to recap episode 7. Invisible Man. We'll talk then. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Catch you next.